Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Ominous developments, gathering clouds, storm clouds on the horizon. We're going into an acceleration of the world crisis. It would have happened sooner, except for Barkey's dithering. But now the dithering apparently has been resolved, perhaps with the help of Major Hassan of Fort Hood or Zazi or KSM or whatever it is. They think they can keep public opinion on their side. So Obama is now going to preside over an orgy of Islamophobia in U.S. society. Not a very good combination. In the course of this state dinner with Manmohan Singh, Obama did the impossible. He was more arrogant. Obama was more arrogant than the Prime Minister of India. And, of course, India is known for arrogance. They are known for the strutting, pompous airs of moral superiority, which they say they got from Gandhi. Well, we'll scratch into that in just a minute. The ominous words again in the toasts that were given last night were the strategic partnership of the U.S. and India and the leadership role of India in Asia. Now, both of those are not exactly friendly for China, and they are downright hostile for Pakistan, and that's quite a combination. China, the more powerful of the two, compared to India, and Pakistan, a very significant country, 160 million people, nuclear weapons, and that strategic position, the energy corridor. So all of this looks very, very bad. We also had the first anniversary now of the Mumbai terrorism events where Pakistan got a very bad deal. They were immediately condemned by the world media as having done this. But I remind people, think of something called the RAW, R-A-W, the Research and Analysis Wing. That is the Indian CIA, right? Every day we hear stories, oh, the Pakistani ISI, inter-service intelligence, how bad they are, what a scandal. Well, sometimes, I'm sure. But the RAW, R-A-W, we have Fareed Zakaria writing in Newsweek and the Washington Post saying that the CIA is telling him that Indian intelligence operations in Afghanistan are minimal. Well, that is baloney, Fareed Zakaria. Fareed Zakaria, I believe, a Muslim coming from India who really ought to know better, of course, but now he's turned his coat and joined the imperialist stable, so he's going to put out what they tell him to. There's an interview here with Lali Weymouth, warmonger, neocon, nepotist, right? She's there because she's the daughter of Catherine Meyer Graham at the Washington Post, the late. So Lali Weymouth, in her inimitable, clipped neocon warmonger accents, does an interview with Manmohan Singh, and they get along great. And it's all, anti-Pakistan, Afghanistan has to be escalated. Manmohan is a big supporter of the U.S. presence. They got to stay in Afghanistan. Escalation would be good, but he won't get into that. The interesting thing is he says that his talks with the Iranians, he gets the idea that the Iranians are encouraged by what they're hearing from the U.S. and the British. Now, this gets into that Zbigniew Brzezinski policy we've talked about, which, again, is to try to manage the internal situation of Iran in such a way as to play Iran against Russia and, indeed, against China. And what I can see, with the help of some friends who have also called this to my attention, in that interview, the Washington Post Outlook section, Sunday, November 22nd, is it's an Indian-Iranian cooperation, a nutcracker against Pakistan. Pakistan at that point would be surrounded on three sides because they'd have the Iranians to the west, the Indians to the east, and they'd have a hostile regime under Karzai in Afghanistan, or at least to some degree. That's really bad for Pakistan, and who knows how they might lash out. And again, they do have nukes, so it shows how stupid this whole thing is. But India, Iran against Pakistan, and then perhaps against China, and then who knows against Russia. This is the folly of Manmohan, right? Remember the Continental daggers in 1914 used by the British. You had the Anglo-French Entente early in the 1900s, and then you had to wait a little while to get the Anglo-Russian entente, and then you put them together, and then you had it. The nutcracker, the encirclement of Germany. So now we got the encirclement of Pakistan. The last time this was done in grand style, 1914, World War I, and the beginning of a world crisis which has not ended yet. So I would speak to people from India. You should cease and desist. This is a suicidal policy. There were leftists and others who opposed the U.S.-Indian nuclear deal. That is a suicide pact, a pact with the devil. India is a great nation. It deserves to survive. This is not the way to survive, by becoming the stooge of the U.S. and the British. And yes, I'm sure you know that you're so much more clever and so much more Byzantine than the stupid Americans and the British. Yes, I know, but so did the Tsar of Russia think he was, and these French radical socialists of 1914. And what have you. And I also want to look for the U.S. From the point of view of the United States, I say, Manmohan Singh, go home. We don't want you. We don't want an alliance with India. And the main reason why is this little question of Kashmir. It's a Muslim area, okay? It's in the northwestern part of India. It's the border with Pakistan. And since 1947, 1948, when India and Pakistan emerged and split, we've had the occupation of the Vale of Kashmir by the Indian Army, despite the fact that the Muslim population there is 95%. 95% of the population is Muslim in the Vale of Kashmir, and they are occupied, and they have been occupied now for 62 years or thereabouts. So as soon as you become a friend of India, you have bought into yet another conflict point with the 1 billion Muslims of the world, and there is no reason to do this, right? People have looked at Israel saying, well, you know, the U.S. is so committed to Israel, we bought ourselves the hostility of a whole bunch of Arabs and Muslims that way. Well, guess what? This is another one which is as big or bigger, depending on where you are, right? It's a little bit further out there into East Asia. But the Vale of Kashmir, this is the apple of discord between India and Pakistan. And remember, we used to have James Baker, and he would say, 17 UN resolutions, 17 UN resolutions. Well, there are quite a few UN resolutions that tell India, hey, you should have a referendum, you should have a plebiscite, you should have free elections in the Vale of Kashmir, that area around Srinagar, and see what the population wants to do. And the Indians will not do it. And therefore, when you get the pompous pose of superiority from one of these Indian Brahmins in the foreign service there, you have to remind them, look, guys, you have overwhelming credentials, right? Your moral superiority is impressive. But wait a minute, what about those Muslims in Kashmir that you insist on oppressing? Because that is what you are doing there. And if you want peace with Pakistan, how can you ever get it if you're holding this area by force? Now, I've referred in previous broadcasts to my friend Christoph Herstel, H-O-R-S-T-E-L, otherwise H-O-E-R-S-T-E-L, and his excellent book, Brandherd, Pakistan, the fiery hearth of Pakistan, where he proposes one of the things you ought to do, excuse me, is to get a conference going, the goal of which is that India would get out of the Vale of Kashmir. And this would allow the following. Kashmir, broadly speaking, the northern areas have always been occupied by the Pakistanis. Fine, they should keep them. There's the Azad area of Kashmir, which the Pakistanis have held. Great, they should keep that too. Then there's Jammu and Kashmir. This means Jammu and Ladakh. The Pakistanis probably should, the Indians should keep that since they've occupied it. The big change is that the Vale of Kashmir, the Srinagar area, would be given over to Pakistan, perpetually demilitarized with normal police force and no guerrillas. And if you don't like it, then just have a plebiscite and see which way they all want to go. We'll be back in a minute.